Next, we have the phrase in terms of origination, which refers to the northern direction of Amoghasiddhi's all-accomplishing wisdom. Here in dharmakāya, we have the source of the diverse joys and sorrows of psychic existence in nirvana, all things associated with mind and in relation to mind. All of the related cycles of the zodiac, karma, and cosmic journeying are mastered by means of the methodology of Amoghasiddhi's wisdom. Now, we've just had Kenya trying to explain her experience, and some of you may have had similar, if you wish, of the reverie of the void of śūnyatā. And you all know that this is what you're working towards for the fourth initiation, to live in that space all the time. Now, I'm sure that Kenya can barely imagine being there always. Her fundamental mind, and from it she can look down with her eyes into the samsara, communicate with it and go back in that space, or just communicate with it while in that space. She also knows that everything to do with phenomena dies. It can't exist there. But when we're talking about dharmakāya, that particular state of śūnyatā, it's just the ground, it's the baseline of cosmic mind. And so dharmakāya is cosmic mind. And Amoghasiddhi's all-accomplishing wisdom is the methodology of bringing cosmic mind into samsara, into your mind, your empirical mind. Of course, the empirical mind has to be trained, emptied of its conceptologies so that dharmakāya can exist. And then that is the Ati Yoga, the Dzogchen, when you can do that, when the mind is no longer resistant to cosmic mind. Yes, Daniel?
Actually, that's an interesting word that you brought up, the resistance, because that's what I felt initially. It was like a resistance to it because I didn't know what it was and it felt very uncomfortable initially. And once I sat in it, then it's almost like these truths, this information starts coming to you. You're picking up what it is slowly, and it takes time. And then you let go of the resistance of it. And of course, I'm sure there's much more to learn in many layers and levels, but that's interesting. Thank you.
Also, just to give you something, when you gained your experience, that's an initiation, if you want, a minor initiation. But what you're really doing is recapitulating a past life when you actually took that initiation. And it corresponded to the time in your life, in this life, when you gained a reflection of it, or an experience or a taste of it, is the proper phrase of the taste of enlightenment.
That's quite true, because thankfully I had a little bit of a glimpse of a memory from a previous lifetime, which really was very, very helpful. Sorry, nothing like the actual experience, but it was able to bring me the calmness that I needed to.
Because you've experienced it in that flesh and whatever, that life was when you took the fourth initiation, the first time. Now, we continue. The term origination refers to the philosophy of dependent origination, or pratitya samutpada, the establishment of the 12-fold cycle of interdependence stemming from ignorance. And I go into this in my books in some detail. Samsara and śūnyatā are integrated by means of the expression of this wisdom in terms of the nexus that incorporates both. And as I said, that's what you are working to establish. In many ways, the nexus is the third eye, the ajna center, or the agna center. So you can see in English it's J, but in Sanskrit it's a ng. Samsara and śūnyatā are integrated by means of the expression of the wisdom in terms of the nexus that incorporates both. And so the awakening of the third eye, of this particular center, is that which allows you to see into multidimensional space. And the very heart of that is śūnyatā. But those two wings of the petals of the Ajna center allows you to go backwards and forwards, either into samsara or outwards into multidimensional space. But it's really just an integrated chakra with the head lotus, the 1,000-petal lotus, which actually has 1,056 petals. The two truths are straddled by means of a third truth of relativity, that all things persist relative to something else. Now, that's one of the main themes of my Buddhist books, is the concept of relativity. One has to understand relativity. And that we understand also in science with the Einstein's theory of relativity. Everything is relative to something else. So you get science and our spiritual philosophy basically being integrated. And that's, again, what I was trying to explain in my esoteric cosmology book. Even śūnyatā is relative with respect to dharmakāya and samsara. Samsara is an important part of this triad and must persist so that enlightenment can evolve. The resultant samsara śūnyatā nexus is the bridge between phenomena and the universality of dharmakāya. And so the śūnyatā samsara bridge is the third eye, and the head lotus is a container for the dharmakāya. And then the rest of your chakras, they are dealing with all the attributes of samsara. The phrase, in terms of philosophical opinion, it is subject to opinions in accordance with the 11 vehicles, relates to the discriminating inner vision of Amitabha and the Western direction of the outward service to humanity. And 11 vehicles, well, I haven't gone into this. These can be looked at, the 11 schools or the methodologies of giving the teachings out. Their basic philosophical content, discriminations, are explained in volume 1 of this treatise, and involves the entire development of the corpus of Buddhism. In volume 1, I give the schools of Buddhism as part of a mandala. And then I put this particular school, this new Buddhism, esoteric Buddhism, at the very center of that. The corpus of Buddhism from the time of the Buddha to the present epoch, specifically a deep analysis of the nature of mind and the relation of śūnyatā is emphasized via the development of meditation techniques that allow one to overcome the factors of suffering. And we all know about the fact of suffering. We all have suffered. We all have pain, and we know all of that. We basically know that most of it is emotional suffering, probably 90% of it. Sometimes we have physiological suffering, pain, for instance, when you cut yourself. But it's nearly always emotional suffering. And what's this emotional suffering? Because you're attached to something or you desire something and it's not coming to fruition the way you want. And therefore your emotions cry out, you've been hurt or whatever. So it's the transience of emotional suffering is what you've got to get over. And you do this by mind through understanding. The mind is what masters the entire emotional body. Understanding is needed. Liberation can thereby be gained from samsara. That's what samsara exists for, to teach you liberation. It's amazing, isn't it? You can think about it as souls. I mean, what does an enlightened being or a soul have to produce a physical body like ours for and go through all these cycles of suffering? It doesn't really make sense, except for the fact that the soul itself on the higher mental plane is working to become liberated. It has to develop wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. The soul itself is already inherently love. But all of this suffering and attachment and non-attachment and all the rest of it is so that we can become wise. And the wisest of us should be the teachers of those that are not so wise. That's the way our societies should be run. And our prime ministers and all of those people that rule us should be the wisest of all. Instead, you get the scum that rises to the top because anyone of any moral ethics, they leave. They're forced out. And all you get is those without the moral, without the ethics. They're the ones that rule. That's the way our societies work. We're talking about, therefore, the analysis of mind, which is what Buddhism is. And you understand 2,500 years of analysis of mind with the greatest minds incarnating the Buddhism. And you get all of this wonderful doctrines as a consequence. And now here you get me and these green books and yourselves are working to spread the next level of Buddhism, and the esoteric Buddhism, the esoteric Dharma. And so it's important for all of you that are not inherently Buddhist in your thinking to understand Buddhism, because it's the integration of the Western Dharma found in Bailey's writings, for instance, and all of Blavatsky and all of that, and with the Buddhist schools, and we have to fuse the two together. And then that's what we have to teach. And therefore, all of my students do have to understand Buddhism and its philosophy, as difficult as it is, because it's much easier just to do the Bailey form of Dharma, but it's only one half. So it's only one side of the Ajna Center. You need the both to have the fully functioning Dharma Dhatu or the Dzogchen. Yes.
Does that mean that we need to understand all the different schools' philosophies? Because a lot of your works, they address the inconsistencies between each different philosophy. Is it okay if we just know the overriding lessons that you're giving? Because I find some, like, getting into all of the specific schools, like that's where my smoke starts coming out of my ears a little bit, because it's so much.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. It's the same with me. I only know the overriding, and it's all that's needed. And the overriding schools are in the first volume of my books. On the whole, most of the Buddhist texts and philosophy, you only need to have the general understanding. It's the main concepts that's needed. Śūnyatā, samsara, dharmakāya, all of these main concepts, to have a good, deep understanding of that, and not just the exoteric, which the Buddhists, but the esoteric as well, the ramifications of it. So, as I've pointed out before, the yogas, what they are, they relate to the initiations. The Buddhists don't tell you that because they don't know initiation. What they have concept of initiations, but it's the concepts of initiations into one or of the tenets of the schools, or one or the other of the yogas, whichever their master, their teacher is, whatever that yoga, initiated into that. Dalai Lama comes every year or so and gives initiation in the Kala Chakra, first level initiation or second level initiation, whatever it is. But these aren't real initiations in terms of gaining expansions of consciousness. They're exoteric rites, but they can produce that if you can find amongst the Buddhist schools an enlightened Lama or enlightened preceptor. They hardly exist. I don't know if they do presently. And also with the schools, it's really only important to know the two main, the Yogacarya and the Madhyamika schools and the Mahayana school. You don't even need to know too much about the Theravada. It's just general, but the difference between the Yogacarya and the Madhyamika, yes, that's important. And that's where we are at. In the Mahayana stream, the concourse of this development involved mainly the distinction between the Madhyamika and the Yogacarya doctrines. Because one, the Madhyamika is really focusing upon śūnyatā, and the Yogacarya is focusing upon mind. And as I pointed out before, there is a distinction between the two. The Madhyamika, in many ways, look down upon the Yogacarya because I think śūnyatā is superior. But as I pointed out before, śūnyatā is just the base for mind. The mind is the superior. Śūnyatā is a vehicle. And therefore, the dharmakāya is beyond śūnyatā, or the vehicle of śūnyatā. Dharmakāya is mind. The dharma is the mind, and the kaya is the vehicle of it. And this mind is universal mind, it's Buddha mind. And with the Buddhist concept, it's the mind of the Buddhas throughout space, contained in the vehicle, which of course is your head center. The phrase, in terms of designation, it has an inconceivable number of distinct names, refers to the southern direction of people's immersion in samsara, to the proclivity to mentally name things they designate as real. And of course, all of you know this problem. People think things are real. You look at the table, well, it's real, I can touch it. And the light or whatever, and if you put your fingers in an electric socket, get electrocuted, and that electricity is real because you know the effects. But it's still transient. Even if you die, you're going to be reborn again. So nothing there is real. I sometimes, and I'm sure all of you do, I like looking at photographs of people that live say 100 years ago or 150 years ago, and you look at their costumes, say in the Victorian era, you know, you put yourself back then, they were just like you and me in those costumes with that Victorian mindset, just living out their lives just the same as we are. But for them, that life that they were living out was real. You can look at an old movie of that particular period of time, or even going back to the time of Charlie Chaplin. You know, the old 1910 silent flicks. They're very lovely to look at. They were alive, right? They touched things. They had phenomena around them. They had their private lives. They lived it all out. You can get an image of what they did, but they're all dead. That's all gone. Some people may be looking at images of their former lives in those movies. That's quite an interesting concept, is it not? Looking at yourself, what you did then. Of course, those of us who meditate on life, we can sometimes get flashes of what we did in a past life. That's what you're all learning to do. But whatever they thought they were touching, the horses that they're riding on, the buggies and so forth, for them that was real. Now we look back at that and it's a cellulose image. It's not real, what it was for them. So that's samsara, those silent movie flicks that you can see flashing in front of your eyes. So this is the southern direction of this particular statement. Thus, they are all the categorizations of mind, which must become refined and integrated into unity by means of aspiration to the unifying attributes of mind. And this is affected by means of Ratnasambhava's equalizing wisdom. Now, what I'm trying to get to here with this particular wisdom, with the equalizing wisdom, you look all around you, and all of you have done this, and you say, what of all of this phenomena is of importance? And people look to lovers, well, they're important. They look to their children they may have had, they're important, but it's all transient. Ultimately, you're looking for something else. There's an inner sort of pain inside you that says, look for something else than this. So some of you have found, for instance, my writings, or you've watched my video, or you've found Alice Bailey or something like that, or you found Buddhism. You're looking for something that fills that inner yearning for meaning in life rather than the transience. And so the equalizing is all that transience is swirling around you is equalized, and it becomes that thing that makes you say, yes, this is it. As I said, it could have been Alice Bailey's writings, it could have been Buddhism, something like that, but eventually it leads you to me, and then from me to hierarchy. So everything is equalized into that one thing. And that one thing is what liberates you from samsara. And so all the swirlers around you, you've got to be involved in it, of course. We've got to keep ourselves alive and play the games of being in physical bodies. There's a purpose for that. But inwardly, the essence of it all is the Dharma that you're learning. And that has all been equalized into that one thing. And then Amitabha's wisdom comes in and discriminates. First of all, it discriminates outwardly in terms of the phenomena, but inwardly discriminates in terms of the various branches of the learning, of the wisdom that you're learning. There's aspects to it. The text now observes the three categories of philosophers. And the schools of reasoning, Rigpa, or Nyaya in terms of Sanskrit, they were historically concerned with analyzing the attributes of mind. The term eternalists refers to the various Brahmanical philosophers. They use the term eternalists because the philosophers are looking at the nature of the universe, Brahma, Brahman, Ishvara, all of these concepts of time, entities, the yugas, all of that comes into it. So the philosophers are speculating upon all of that type of phenomena. Evans Wentz uses the term heretics here. They have a concept of eternal self or soul, Ātman. And this, of course, is the fundamental difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. In Hinduism, they have this concept of eternal self and Ātman, which in my writing, I explain it in the first volume of my Secret Doctrine book. And I point out that there is a reality to this concept of Ātman, but it's actually a fusion of the monad, our concept of monad, and soul. It's an integration between the two. The problem with Ātman, they're going with the concept of Brahman, which is eternal, unceasing, unchanging, and all the rest of that. And it's very similar to śūnyatā. So the Brahmins say that all of us are Ātmans. And then you get the term, one who's gained that experience of Ātman, jivatman, an enlightened being. And that's correct. The Buddhists and the Buddha coming in the middle between all extremes and said, no, there's no such thing as a permanent soul. And our philosophy speaks of a soul, but the soul that we speak of, now I use the term Sambhogakaya flower, and that's a descriptive term of what the soul is. The Sambhogakaya level is the higher level of the mind, just translating the Buddhist term, and then the flower that exists on there, it's a chakra. And that's not permanent. It dies. It was born at a particular time and it dies eventually at the fourth initiation. But with the Hindu concept of Ātman, they think it's a permanent thing. What is permanent is the spirit, the monad. It itself has a lifespan, but it's reckoned in cosmic scale. And cosmic scale outlives births and deaths of a solar system. So it's something that I only want to speculate upon right now. And therefore, as I said, the Hindu concept of Ātman is really this interrelation. It's a fusion of the soul monad. Whereas the Buddhists say, no, everything that is of mind is impermanent, therefore changing. There's no such thing as a stable soul that lasts forever. They are correct and incorrect. The Hindus are correct and incorrect. We do have a soul, and the Buddhists say there's no soul because they're only looking at Ātman, the Brahmanical view of Ātman, of a soul. So what I did in my book, my first 3 volumes, I used to call it the I concept. Incidentally, I just thought I'd bring this book here. And I published this about year 2009. So I said to myself, well, I've got to rewrite the book. That's what I did. So the I concept was converted into the first 3 volumes of the Treatise on Mind. And it's mentioned in the foreword or the preface of those books. But before I did that, I started with volume 4 of the series. So if you all understand, I had the manuscript, but I wanted to start with where it was all leading to. So I first wrote this book, Mandalas. So of the whole, what you might call this series of Treatise of Mind, this was the first one that was published. But what I was really trying to explain in the I concept, and see, this has got to do with the I, the me, the mind. What is an I concept? And the very heart of that is the distinction between Ātman and Nairātman, which is the Buddhist no soul. And so the argument between a soul and a no soul is the argument of what an I is, Ātman. And with the concept of an Ātman, with the I, then I use the term personal I, because that's the intellect. You identify with an I. You look at the mirror and whatever you see there, you think that's what you are, the I, me, mine. But in Buddhism, there's no such thing. It's a transient bundle of aggregates. And so we get into aggregates later on, samskaras, if you want, klishas and things like that. It's all transient, it's moving. There's nothing there that's static. And so that concept of I doesn't exist. Well, it exists in your mind, but it's not the real. If that makes sense to you. And then you get the Ātman concept. That exists in the Brahman mind, but it's still not real because they haven't got it correct. And then there's the Buddhist concept of Nairātma, no Ātman, no soul. That is also incorrect. There is a soul. And so the whole purpose of this book, the I concept, was to point out to Buddhists that there is a soul, using their philosophy to prove it. It's a very difficult thing to do. And so I did that in volume 3. Or by the time I got to volume 3, but before then, I had to invent terminology. And so there's a whole sequence of terminology. And then I used the concept, the personal I, and then the I consciousness. And I'll explain that, the meaning of the I consciousness later, because I couldn't use the Bailey terminology. I had to use Buddhist concepts. Okay, so that's this eternal self or soul, the Ātman, and the translation there is eternalist, because I think of a eternal soul. And no, there's no such thing, except of course monad, if you want to go that far off. But monad and dharmakāya in my mind are the same. Then I say, though errors may exist, the analysis of each school have something positive to contribute to the philosophical debate as to the nature of mind. For example, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are concerned with the control and the vicissitudes of mind. And the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Bailey books, is the Light on the Soul, is a translation of them. And you can go to the Light of the Soul and look at that. But it's a Hindu text. Are concerned with the control of the vicissitudes of mind, which is very similar to the Yogacarya doctrines. And the only difference is in the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, they use Ātman. And with the Yogacarya doctrines, they don't use the term Ātman. They use śūnyatā or whatever instead. That's the only difference. In such a list, one could also add the atheistic concepts of materialistic thinkers. And incidentally, for all of you, I take atheism as just another religion. In ancient India, it was so. It was just one of the 6 philosophical systems. The religion of materialism, the scientific religion, if you want. Scientific materialism is a religion in our society. They believe in it, absolutely. The phrase pious attendance refers to the adherents of the Theravada schools. The outcome of the analysis of mind produces the ahat, a contemplative absorption. The next phrase, Chittamatrins call it mind, so now going through all the philosophical schools, refers to the Yogacarya Chittamatrin school. Chitta means mind or the substance of mind. So the Yogacarya is also called Yogacarya Chittamatrin. And there's slight difference between the two, but it's insignificant. Who describe it as it actually is, without philosophical distortion. This is the major teaching of the Mahayana school and the foundation of the higher tantric validation of mind. Instead of mind with a small m, Evans Wentz uses the term wisdom in Tibetan Zen to depict what the outcome of the evolution of mind is. And remember earlier I said wisdom is the principal thing. And here I think I'm quoting from the book of Ecclesiastes too, in the Bible. Their wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. He thus keeps the discourse in line with his dissertation, which is concerned with enlightenment attributes. Including the Chittamatrin view, we then have a list of 8 qualifications associated with the Buddhist viewpoint, mostly beginning with the phrase, some call it. This presentation also involves the higher correspondence of the 8 consciousnesses of the Yogacarya philosophy that can be placed in the correct sequence upon the arms of the 8-spoked wheel, which is the 8-armed cross. It's called astadhistas. So the 8 consciousnesses is quite important for all of you to understand, and in the Buddhist philosophy. And the sense consciousness, as you all know, related to the sense perceptors, the eyes, the nose, mouth, ears, and the skin, or the sense of touch, and they produce the related consciousnesses. And in Buddhism, they give another sense, which they call the mind, with a small n. And so that's the 6. Intellect for them is just the same as any of the other sense perceptors. It's a coordinating tool. But there's 2 others. These 2 others are quite important in Buddhism. That makes the 8. One is called kliṣṭamanas, or the filed mind, and the other is the ālayavijñāna, what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop there and read from volume 1 of my book, because what I want to do is I just want to explain these 8 consciousnesses, and then I'll wrap it up for today. And my first volume, which is the self and not self in Buddhism, explains these from page 163 onwards. Here I also introduce my terminology, which I have to use because I need to somehow bring in the concept of a soul, of the Sambhogakaya flower. Eventually I use the Uttara Tantra of Maitreya to explain the soul. Now, so I'm reading from page 163, the I consciousness and kliṣṭamanas. Now, referring to the previous quote from Hopkins, one can say that when perceiving or exploring more than just the aggregates, now the aggregates are that which is obtained through the sense consciousness, then such a construct can be called the I consciousness. So we're looking at what is more than just what is obtained through sense perception. So I call it the I consciousness. And now I define what I mean by this, rather than just the personal I of self-identity. Now the personal I is what you think of yourselves as. The I consciousness is beyond that. The I consciousness can then be viewed as the collective consciousness of all past activity, including that of past lives, that coherently utilizes the aggregates and directs them to further gain evolutionary experience. I got a little footnote here that the subject of this definition inquiry does not involve a quest to reinstate what is meant by the Hindu technical term Ātman, which I explained earlier. Another type of identity is subject of consideration derived from proper analysis of Buddhist ontological thought. Later, the term I consciousness will be replaced with more appropriate terminology when I use the term the Sambhogakaya flower. But right now, I can't use that term, so I define I consciousness in terms that Buddhists can understand and accept. Because if I use philosophy or terminology they can't understand and won't accept, they'll never read the books. They don't read the books anyway, but they will in time. The I consciousness can then be viewed as the collective consciousness of all past activity, including that of past lives, that coherently utilizes the aggregates and directs them to further gain evolutionary experience. These aggregates flow in different streams within a continuum, which is called santana. That continuum is like a river. That's just a flowing river of your samskaras, of your collective experiences. And I have in one of my books called The River Simile, which relates to the Santana. And it's a very good chapter. It's well worth reading. A continuum, Santana, from one life to another. And any portion of them are collectivized during any life by the mind, which is consciousness. That interrelates them into a personality known conventionally as a self. And so there's my definition of a self. For the duration of the appearance of the samskaras concerned, then I got in brackets, which evolve through the educational process of birth, adolescence, maturity, old age, and death, as depicted by the 12 links of dependent origination. And so it now links it all within Buddhist ontology, and we're all happy, and the Buddhists are happy. And I didn't explain soul. I explained it purely in terms of Buddhist philosophy, santana, flowing stream of consciousness, links, samskaras. These aggregates are then modified by the self or the personality for the duration of the consciousness that has free will and perceives action to be committed. So that's what you are, yes? Consciousness that has free will and perceives action to be committed. Good or bad, whatever it is, that's what makes you. New samskaras and associated karma are then produced that modify the future accordingly, because the actions you do now produce the future. The santana flows into the future. Consciousness focused upon the slowly changing appearance or form wrongfully identifies with it calling it an I, right? So we got the phrase wrongfully identifies with it. You think that that is what you are, when it's not. You are something more than that. You are actually the I consciousness. In reality, the I is the quantum. Now, all of you know what the term quantum is. You got the phrase quantum physics. It's the particularization of a particle of something. It makes it into a definite thing. So in reality, the I is the quantum of some skaras and skandhas manifesting through at any time, collectivized by consciousness reacting to the impact of external stimuli from the environment of which it is a part. Such a self, inverted commas of course, because we now know that the self is just a bundle of samskaras moving through time, which is santana. Such a self thus has no lasting permanence, but a relative one, relative to other individualized units of self-consciousness that appear in the same space-time continuum that is occupying. There's something else for all of you to think of. The same space-time continuum. This is again physics. They use the same phraseology. They are all evolving and interrelating together, producing a similar karmic patterning or weaving that coherently interrelates them all into one organism, or flux of coming and going into and out of incarnation. And when we got this one organism, one karmic flow, one or karmic patterning, then we really have the concept of mandala. It should be noted that the I consciousness is an aspect of the ālayavijñāna. So what we've been describing, what I gave the description of as an I consciousness, is ālayavijñāna. And so we get the highest of the 8 consciousnesses of the Yogacarya philosophy. And in between the mind and the ālayavijñāna is a thing called kliṣṭamanas, which is what I'm trying to get to explain. Okay, it should be noted that the I consciousness is the aspect of the ālayavijñāna and interrelates freely with it and also with the personal I. When the personal I is manifesting as an aspect of the I consciousness in the 3 worlds of human interrelationships. So we get another number, 3 worlds of human interrelationships. That is your physical form, your emotional or astral form, and your mental body. The 3 worlds, that's what you live in, that's samsara, right? You can see also that in Buddhism, we like these numbers. Numerology is all the way through Buddhism. 3 worlds, that's all we need to say. And bang, you got those things. 8 consciousnesses, oh yeah, that's what they are. You don't have to explain anymore. They got all down pat in terms of these simplified numbers. Now, I say here, to better understand what I mean by the term I consciousness, I shall weave in here a little of the Yogacarya philosophy concerning the 8 consciousnesses. And this is necessary as we endeavor to understand the nature of mind or manas. And then I use the statement from the Lankavatara Sutra, which I'm not going to quote. I'll skip all of that. The Lankavatara Sutra is very much at the heart of Zen Buddhism, and they use it in Japan, specifically in China. Our monks will use this also. So I'll skip that because it's technical terminology that one has to translate from here. Manas now is mind itself. And remember, we used the term chitta matra, and chitta is the substance of mind. Manas is mind. So manasa putra means the body of mind. When manas is turned to the empirical world and identifies with the form via the sense perceptions through which it functions, then I call this the personal I, right? So that's the definition of what we are. Manas working through the sense perceptions through which it functions. When manas is turned towards the realization of mind's pure essence, and so this is the dual function of mind. It can either go downwards via the sense perception, or it can go and reside within the pure essence of mind, the dharmakāya, if you wish, or the ālayavijñāna. Or rather, when the nature of that essence is directed towards the personal I, producing intuitive flashes of insight, then we find the activity of the I consciousness. The I consciousness can also be described in relation to the seventh of the 8 consciousnesses, termed ālayavijñāna or kliṣṭamanas. So now we're looking at the seventh of the 8 consciousnesses. Kliṣṭamanas is very important. Kliṣṭa means basically the filed or defiled mind. And you can look at it in terms of emotional mind or karma manas. That's their Buddhist terminology for that. And Tsongkhapa. Now, Tsongkhapa is the founder of the Gelugpa school, which the Dalai Lama is part of. He is one of the great enlightened beings in Buddhism. He describes kliṣṭamanas thus. Kliṣṭamanas is defined as that obscured, and the term in Sanskrit is nivritta, mind, not the subject of moral rising, which views the maturation part of ālayavijñāna as self and has only 9 mental factors like contact, attachment, etc. The text further states, by nivritta is meant repeatedly polluted by afflicted emotions, kliṣṭa. Now, our Buddhist monks in their whole school works upon the cleansing of kliṣṭas, these afflicted emotions. And you can all think of what your afflicted emotions are, all your attachments to self, basically, concepts of self and so forth, and all the other things. And because this kliṣṭamanas has been repeatedly polluted by the 4 root afflictions of emotions, kliṣṭa. How could its surrounding mental factors be only 9? Are there not also the following 6? Distraction, implicit in the opinion, I am here. Carelessness, I'm just skipping the Sanskrit terms, implicit in attachment and stupidity. Fixation, implicit in attachment and the absence of faith. And then laziness, dullness, implicit in the stupidity part. Are there not therefore 15 mental factors surrounding kliṣṭamanas? This is just a philosophical query. Now he says no, although these 6 mental factors are said to be there, still the number of mental factors associated with kliṣṭamanas is exactly 9. And we're talking about the mental factors, remember, the sense perceptors and the consciousness associated with them, plus the mind itself, or the intellect, manas. But kliṣṭamanas then adds some more factors to this. And these are 4 added factors. Now, I love this part in Buddhism, and it is something I want you all to remember for yourself as to what the prime kliṣṭas, defilements of mind are. And these are them. Because the 4 bases for imputing these 6 are material realities. And the 4 afflictive emotions are opinion about I. So opinion about yourself, that's one of them. Stupidity about I. Stupidity about whatever you think you are. Pride of I. Pride of all your attachments to things. And self-love. The 6 do not exist apart from these 4. So, opinion about yourself, stupidity about yourself, pride in yourself, and self-love. And that's where most people are at, is it not so? That there is no mental factor beyond the material realities of these 9 can be understood in detail from a particular sutra, fearing proximity. And because it is not really a difficult idea, I'll not pursue it here. Now, the question is kliṣṭamanas on the same level as the level on which the person in which these mind streams exist was born or is not? And then it just goes on with these questions relating to kliṣṭamanas. Now, a little bit below, I give my explanation here of what kliṣṭamanas is. Kliṣṭamanas is the name given to the many types of afflictive emotions, kliṣas, stored as bijas or seeds in the ālayavijñāna, which is the storehouse of consciousness. And you can think of the ālayavijñāna also in terms of yourself, but it's also the collective mind of which all souls reside. They are projected in the form of related samskaras when the personal I is focused upon an object of desire. When these emotional samskaras surface, they immediately fuse with the mental consciousness, which is mano-vijñāna, which is just a fusion of vijñāna, discriminative abilities, and manas, consciousness, to produce such things as desire mind, self-will, etc., the four types of afflictive motions or forms of ego clinging. The emotions always manifest in relationship to the concept of self, executing the will to appropriate things desired. They thus produce attachments for all things deemed pleasurable, glamorous, or needy by the personality, and react to that which they dislike. So you can see them all around you there, all the people that you know. There's all to find here. Yes?
Did I misunderstand? Did you say ālayavijñāna that's connected to the soul, or is it the monad, dharmakāya?
I know. Alaya is the universal mind, if you want. So the soul itself for yourself, your own personal, can be considered the ālayavijñāna for you, but the soul itself is also within a collective ālayavijñāna of all souls and then the mental plane itself. So ālayavijñāna is a little bit more than that, but for you, it's the soul, which is your higher mind. And so if you want, there's a personal ālayavijñāna, but there's a collectivized one as well. It's the store of all aspects of mind that exist on the higher realms of the mind. And above that, there's universal mind, if you want, which is the dharmakāya, or cosmic mind. So between the ālayavijñāna and the dharmakāya is śūnyatā. So śūnyatā is a mirror that reflects the dharmakāya into ālayavijñāna. And ālayavijñāna then particularizes whatever's there. And then your little personality, the I concept, takes its quantum within its mind, and it thinks that that is all it is. It identifies, stupidity, all the rest of that. Okay. So we've got the mana-vijñāna to produce such things as desire, mind, self-will, the four types of afflictive emotions, are forms of ego clinging, the emotions always manifesting in relationship to the concept of self, executing the will to appropriate things desired. They just produce an attachment for all things deemed pleasurable, glamorous, or needy by the personality, and react to that which they dislike. So that describes the personality. There are said to be 9 mental factors to kliṣṭamanas. 5 of these are expressed by the 5 sense consciousnesses and are really 5 watery attributes of the 5 elements, of which the 5 senses come to be expressions. The emotions and the factor of desire are governed by the watery element, emotions and desire, and thus kliṣṭamanas is really afflictive whenever the mind is conditioned by this element in any way. So now you get an idea of what kliṣṭamanas is, the afflictive emotions, or the afflictive mind. It's afflicted by watery attributes. There are fiery emotions or mental emotions, as well as teary ones of desire mind, and those promoted by visual stimulus, as well as derived by the sense of touch. These need not be analysed here, as the reader can do this with the information presented in this series. The remaining 4 factors are thus related to the production of the concept of self or I that will be dealt with later. Mano-vijñāna designates all things into their various categories and thus can be called the intellect or rational mind, minus the factor of desire or emotions. It is this discriminatory, separative, imaginative, creative, and a collector of all facts or on impressions from the 5 senses. The added desires and emotions associated with kliṣṭamanas entangle the concepts and the images of the mano-vijñāna with identification of things experienced and draw all experiences into a relationship with the concept of an I or ego. The resultant attachment to things causes ignorance concerning the real nature of what is desired and appropriated for the little self. The two qualities, ālayavijñāna and kliṣṭamanas, together with the 5 consciousnesses and the 5 aggregates, make the personal I. Okay, and we could go on, you can read this book yourself, and there's more and more definitions and explanations of kliṣṭamanas and bodhicitta and the rest of it. So now you know the 8 consciousnesses of the Yogacarya philosophy. So when Buddhists talk about 8 consciousnesses, you have an idea of what is meant. And you can get an idea from all of this just how deep the Buddhist philosophy is. And the thing that I give later in my books, the kliṣṭamanas is the foundation for the development of bodhicitta, the enlightened mind, for what we call love or love wisdom. Without kliṣṭamanas, you cannot develop love wisdom. Just think of the function of the emotions, the real function of the emotions and attachment, the watery attachments to things. The bodhicitta or love wisdom is buddhi, which is the higher correspondence. It's the airy aspect of the waters. There is a place where the waters are converted into air. That process is what makes enlightenment. That watery attachment to things leads to devotion, right? And then devotion produces aspiration, and aspiration produces the path to enlightenment. So the kliṣṭamanas is converted into bodhicitta via this process: devotion, aspiration, and the realization of the goal. Everything has its purpose, including the 5 minds.